Okay, welcome back to some more fun with math. In this video, we are going to look at how to work with consecutive integer problems. So the first things that we need to know is we need to know what consecutive integers are. So when we talk about consecutive integers, we are talking about numbers that are right next to each other. Now there's a couple of ways that we can see it. We can see what's called strict consecutive integers. This means that each integer is exactly one away from the other. So what that means is if n represents an integer, then your consecutive integers would be listed as n, which is where you start, and then n plus 1, n plus 2, n plus 3, and so on. Okay. However, we can have what's called even or odd, and even and odd share the same definition. What it means is that each integer is exactly 2 away from each other. So when we talk about even and odd in terms of their formula, again, we would look at that if n was your integer, then your formula would resemble n, because that's where you start, and then we have n plus 2, n plus 4, n plus 6, n plus 8, and so on and so forth. Okay? So when you're working your problems, one of the things that you have to pay attention to is the wording. Are we talking about just a good old-fashioned straight integer? Or are we talking about an even or an odd? And we have to use this idea in order to set up a formula and then solve. So what I wanted to do is look at a couple different examples to show you just that. So first we have find 3 consecutive integers whose sum is 93. So first and foremost, consecutive integers is your key, which means we are looking at n plus 1, n plus 2, n plus 3, and so on and so forth. Okay? So the first thing is we have to identify which rule we're using. Now, with that, we have 3 integers whose sum is going to be 93. So that being said, we have your first integer plus your second plus your third has to equal 93. Now, the other piece that we have to pay attention to is how we identify n1, 2, and 3. So, one of the things that I like to do is I like to do what's called make myself a key. So I have n1 is my first integer, so it's my starting point. It's going to equal n. n2 would represent my second integer. And if we look at our formula, the second integer is going to be where you started from plus 1. When n is 3, this is my third. And if you look at the third spot here, we have where you start from plus 2. Now we only wanted to find 3 different integers. So we have it. So what we have to do is we need to replace n1, n2, and n3 with the appropriate formulas, these values here. So this formula is going to become n plus, and then my n2 was n plus 1, so this is n plus 1 plus my n3 is the n plus 2, and this has to equal 93. So now I have something that I can solve. So if we look at it, everything outside the parentheses is plus, so the parentheses essentially drop away. And so I have 1, 2, 3 n's. So this becomes 3n plus, and I have 1 plus 2 is 3 equals 93. Solve for n. To do that, says I need to take this 3 and I need to move it. Since it's being added, to move it says I have to subtract. So I end up with 3n equals 90. Divide everything by 3 and we end up with n equals 30. Now that is not actually the answer to our problem, because we have to find the first, second, and third integers. So when we are talking about our solution here, we are looking at using these ideas. So my first integer was represented by n, and in this case n is 30. My second integer is going to be n plus 1, which equals 30 plus 1, or 31. And then my third equals n plus 2. So 30 plus 2 gives you 32, and this would be your answers: 30, 31, and 32. Okay? So once you figure out what your variable or your integer equals, that is not the end result. The end is you have to answer your question, and we wanted 3 consecutive integers that when you add them together give you 93. Now of course you can always check your work by coming back up here to the beginning and plug it in. So my first n was 30 plus 31 plus 32. And when you add that all together, you get 93. Alright, let's look at another one. It says, if the first of 3 consecutive integers is subtracted from 120, the result is the sum of the second and the third. What are the integers? So there's a few things we need to take out of that one. First, we are dealing with 3 consecutive integers. So essentially what that means is we have your first, which would be represented by your n, your second, which is going to be n plus 1, and your third, which is going to be n plus 2. Now I know that because we are just doing consecutive integers. Okay, they don't say even or odd, so consecutive means one right after another. So now we have, if the first is subtracted from 120. So essentially what that means is we have 120 minus my first integer, and then it says the result is, so that's equals the sum of the second, so my second integer, plus my third. Once you figure out the base formula, you can then plug in the information you know. My first integer is represented by n, so this is 120 minus n. My second is going to be n plus 1. So this becomes n plus 1 plus my third was n plus 2. Now that we have everything we need, you can go ahead and solve. Since I'm adding these two together, the parentheses go away, and we have 120 minus n is equal to 2n plus 3. And then I would take this n here and I would move it. Because it's being subtracted, to move it says I have to add. So this is going to be 120 is equal to 3n plus 3. I would take this 3 and we need to move it to the other side. Because it's being added, to move it says you have to subtract. So 120 minus 3 gives you 117 equals 3n. And then we're going to take that 117 and we're going to divide it by 3, which comes out with 39 equals my n. Now again, just like before, this is not the end result because I want to find 3 consecutive integers. So here in my key, I can just simply fill things in. My first one is n, which equals 39. My second integer is n plus 1. So 39 plus 1 is 40. My third is 39 plus 2, which is 41. And this is your end result. Again, you could take these numbers and you could plug them back into your original equation to double check that they work. Okay? So now let's look at another one. I have find 3 consecutive even integers such that the sum of 3 times the first and twice the third is 20 less than 6 times the second. So the biggest thing to keep in mind here is that we have the word even. So what we have to remember is that even says we are dealing with n, n plus 2, n plus 4, n plus 6, and so on. So I want 3 consecutive even integers. So my first is going to equal n. My second is going to equal n plus 2. And my third is going to equal n plus 4. So I have everything mapped out that I need. So here I now have to break down my equation. So I have 3 consecutive even integers such then the following is true. First I've got the sum of 3 times the first and twice the third. So 3 times the first would be 3 times n1 plus twice the third, twice n3, is equal to 20 less than 6 times the second. So that means 6 times n2 minus 20. So here, what we have to do is we have to replace the n1, n2, and 3 with what we know. So we know the first is n, so this becomes 3n. We know my third was n plus 4, so this becomes plus 2 times the n plus 4 is equal to, and then I have 6 times the second, so this becomes 6 times the n plus 2 minus 20. Now all you have to do from here is you just simply have to find n, which will then give you your 3 integers. So here we have to distribute on both sides of my equation. So you're going to have 3n plus 2n plus 8 is equal to 6n plus 12 minus 20. Combine my terms, and when I do that, 3 plus 2 gives me 5n plus 8 equals a 6n, and then again I need to combine my terms. So here when I do that, you're going to have minus, and then we have 12 minus 20, which is going to be minus 8. I would then take this 5n and I would move it. Because it's positive, to move it says I have to subtract. So this is going to give me 8 equals n minus 8. I then need to take my 8 and I need to move it. Because it's negative, to move it says I have to add. So we're going to end up with n equaling 16. The first thing that you want to check is, did the result you get match your label? Here we wanted an even integer, and in this case 16 is even. If this came out to being odd, then that would be a good indication that we made a mistake. So as long as this comes out being the integer type you want, most likely you're on the right path. Now we have to take what we know and we need to find our 3 integers. So first, my n came out to be 16. I then have to find my second, which in this case is going to be n plus 2. So 16 plus 2 is 18. Notice both of these are even. And then I have n plus 4. So 16 plus 4 gives you 20. Since all 3 of my integers are even, chances are I'm on the right track. The way that you would check your work is you would simply plug them into your original formula where they go, and you should get that both sides of your equation equal. Alright, so that is in a nutshell everything that you would need to know about working with consecutive integers, whether they're consecutive or they're consecutive even or consecutive odd. Remember, you need to look for how many integers it is you have to find, and then simply apply the formula that's written down. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, remember to have fun, enjoy yourself, relax, keep smiling, and as always, I'll see you next time.